Morning. So you got the 2 for $4 deal at McDonald's.
Oh, you too. Pulling an all-dayer?
Yep. I'm going to read all of my emails and respond.
I'm going to refill the water cooler, just to be nice.
Well, I'm going to start a book club where every coworker is welcome.
Oh, well, it better not overlap with the after-hours pottery class I'm hosting, so...
Pull an all-dayer. Get a sausage McMuffin with egg, a bacon, egg, and cheese biscuit, or a bacon, egg, and cheese McGriddles. Right now, get any 2 for just $4. Only at McDonald's. Cannot be combined with any other offer or combo meal. Single item at regular price at participating McDonald's.
At least for 15 minutes or longer, depending on whatever you want to do here.
You're live right now.
Well, here we are, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening. East and west of the Rockies, north and south of the Pleiades. And in every time zone and dimension, this is the paranormal lawyer, Michael W. Hall, coming at you like a cosmic tumbleweed blowing in from an undisclosed location deep within the bowels of an abandoned Nike missile site. And I want you to grab your favorite beverage tonight, folks. Kick your shoes off and relax. We are going to have a fun show tonight. My guest for the next 3 hours later on is going to be Liz Reeder, who is the paranormal mystery author, the author of the 51 book series. So we're going to be talking with her soon. But before that, I love to bring on my friend and yours, Vince Ynzunza. Ynzunza. Let me pronounce it correct first of all, because I've been working on this. And Vince is the proprietor, of course, of Pacific NorthWEIRD, and he always comes on with some interesting paranormal news updates. And Vince, where the heck are you today?
Well, Michael, thanks for having me on. I am in Longview, Washington today at Squirrel Fest.
Yes, you're kidding me.
I am not kidding you at all, Michael. This is a festival dedicated to squirrels. I have never seen so many squirrel art or squirrel representations in my life, and well, frankly, I feel at home here. I love it.
Yes, if you can feel at home with Bigfoots and cryptids and ghosts, you got to tell us about your ghost event last weekend also. But, man, this is just the place for you today. Squirrel Fest. Is this an annual event?
Yes. I believe today is the 8th annual Squirrel Fest. And it started in Longview, Washington, of course, 8 years ago. But it is meant to commemorate the world's first squirrel bridge that was created in 1963 by a man named Amos J. Peters. Amos was dismayed that he saw so many squirrels being flattened by cars on this one neighborhood street in Longview, and he decided he was going to create a bridge for these squirrels, a bridge for them to safely traverse a street and not get squashed. And since then, 6 more squirrel bridges have been created. There are now 7 in Longview, I believe. And just today, we saw the unveiling of the 8th squirrel bridge, which is very impressive. It's one of the most state-of-the-art bridges I have seen. It's got a reader board on it that will track the amount of squirrels that cross it. Every time a squirrel crosses, it will add a tally number, and they're anticipating adding seasonal messages to the reader board as well, like for Christmas and Halloween and Hanukkah, hopefully, and whatnot.
That is great. So you were actually at the unveiling of the new squirrel bridge today.
Yes, and I've been filming since about 7:30 this morning for a very special Pacific NorthWEIRD episode on the Squirrel Festival.
Well, I'll bet. Talk about footage. This would be a great opportunity to get some interesting images. Matter of fact, can you describe a little bit about what a squirrel bridge looks like?
Well, the one that was just unveiled today it kind of looks like the Bridge of the Gods. If you've ever traveled that particular bridge from Washington to Oregon, or vice versa, it's very state of the art, modern, metal corrugated. And it seems futuristic because it has the reader board on it. It sort of looks like the Silver Bridge that Mothman took down back in 1965 or something.
Oh, yes. Yeah, that in Point Pleasant. That is interesting.
West Virginia.
Right,
yeah.
right.
So of course, I'm always looking for angles and different types of fun I can have with a video. So I was thinking of maybe creating a character called Moth Squirrel. Could be a combination of squirrel and Mothman that would be a herald or a harbinger. I think I pronounced that right. A harbinger of doom for the community, but in a good-natured way.
Well, there you go. Yeah, I think that would be a great character to develop, especially with you being the author of Biggie Got Foot. You know, I'm assuming you could come up with a theme song for the squirrel as well.
Oh, I'm working on it.
So how many squirrels does it tell you a squirrel count per day, or just the overall squirrels?
Well, if this bridge works as it was intended, it's going to tally every squirrel individually. So it's going to be a very accurate count of the squirrels who have wisely taken advantage of this bridge to reach their destination, as opposed to running dead on into traffic.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a great idea. My gosh. Matter of fact, they've built...
squirrel, I'd be very excited about this.
Yeah, exactly. Even if you're not a squirrel, I'm excited, you know. But it seems to me that the proof is in the pudding. They can actually show how many squirrels have safely crossed the road over this squirrel bridge.
Yeah, you know, and the city council, they like numbers, so this is a good thing. It's about time that the squirrel bridge and our advocacy for squirrel safety reaches the modern age.
Yes, I'm sure that'll be part of some city council person's platform in the next election. But they are very forward-thinking down there, in you know, in Longview. So tell us what else is happening at a Squirrel Fest.
Well, later tonight, in about an hour and a half, the 90s swing revival band Cherry Poppin' Daddies will be playing. And I was given a complimentary ticket to them from the organizers here at Squirrel Fest, so I will be videotaping some Cherry Poppin' Daddies stuff. I remember them when I was in high school. That was kind of a big thing.
All right.
I believe they did the song Zoot Suit Riot.
There you go. A classic.
And there's also a squirrel mascot of the area, Sandy B. McNutter, I believe the name is. And it's this wonderful human being in a squirrel costume that wanders around the festivities and takes photos of people. And I had a good long session with Sandy, taking video footage. There's a lot of local art vendors who have created their own interpretations of the squirrel art. I bought a T-shirt that is a combination of David Bowie and a squirrel, which I am coining as Nutty Stardust.
Very good. And I would imagine
a fabulous beer garden.
Oh, well, perfect. Yeah, you can't have a festival without a beer garden for sure. Any wine tasting going on down there?
Nothing connected to the festival itself. It's pretty blue collar Coors Light type of stuff down here, which I'm okay with.
Yeah. Well, wonderful. And is this something that they are advertising now as one of the founding father kind of events in town? I'm sure they have other events down there in Longview as well that they promote.
Yeah, well, I mean, Longview is a pretty happening place if you like small communities with, I guess, a very weird identity to them, which is what my show is all about, and I constantly seek those things out.
Yes, you do.
I'm not too familiar with Longview itself, but I've been familiar with this event for the past couple of years, and I guess the past couple of years I have been unable to attend because of different video production things I've been doing. But finally this year I made it a point to come here for my first time, and well, it's wonderful. I'm going to return next year. Squirrel Fest is a great thing, and it's one of those events that really showcases the beauty of a small town that has found their one weird claim to fame, and they're going with it. And I love that.
Yes. Matter of fact, as you come into town for the Squirrel Fest, what would be the first thing that you would see that would be letting you know that the Squirrel Fest is happening? Do they have banners across the street or anything like that?
Yeah, well, they have a kind of a makeshift old, like a cart that you would normally see pulled from the back of a pickup truck, and they have that kind of in this roundabout area, and they have this paint on it that says Squirrel Fest 2018. That is right next to the community college here, which in the lawn area has a giant statue of a squirrel, which is there year-round, and it's there to really showcase this community's love for their nut-gathering brethren.
Oh, right. Well, listen, you were at a unique position last weekend, I believe, that I would like you to explain to the folks what you were doing last weekend. Okay.
Well, are you talking about the ghost hunt I was on?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, well, recently I have been making a video on the haunted Lewis County Historical Museum located in Chehalis, Washington. It's a former train station, and it is one of the most unique, beautiful buildings you have ever set foot in, and it is like Grand Central Station for the paranormal. I was lucky enough to be a guest to South Sound Paranormal Research's ghost investigation there, led by Patty Valdez. And I shadowed them and filmed their investigation. And since then, I've been doing a lot of, creative cinematic filming there, kind of chronicling very unique items within the museum that have a paranormal story around them. Most importantly being Clarence the mannequin. There's this mannequin there named Clarence that is undocumented, essentially. There's about a dozen mannequins in the museum. All of them have paperwork where they came from, such as old Woolworth stores and Nordstrom and everything. Clarence is the only mannequin that has no documentation. They don't know where he came from, but he's just there. And people have claimed to have seen him move, seen his eyes move, his hand move. People get a really weird feeling around Clarence. So I've been having a lot of fun collecting stories and just doing a dynamic video about this unique museum.
Wow. Yeah. And now, did you say you were locked in there overnight or something?
Yeah, well, I was technically locked in for about 3 hours. But I was there with Alexandra Sullivan, who is my co-founder and co-host of Pacific NorthWEIRD, and we were there just having some fun, experimenting with different types of lighting, just videotaping the unique things there for the purpose of dynamic cinematic expression.
Yeah. Well, and before we let you go here, you've got to give a little plug and tell us what Pacific NorthWEIRD is actually, and then how people can watch it, because I think it's a great production.
Of course, sure, thank you. Pacific NorthWEIRD is a video series that I write and produce and direct. It is a documentation of all the strange, weird, wonderful things in the Pacific Northwest that make this place really unique. You know, Washington, Oregon especially, we've got such a deep UFO connection. The term flying saucer came from Washington. The first reported man in black sighting came from Washington. The term Bigfoot and Sasquatch came from the Northwest. There's so many paranormal claims to fame that we have, and I'm a native of this area, so are everyone I work with, and our goal is to really create a video love letter to this region and have fun with it.
Well, and you sure
and
do.
We do music videos. We make music videos. We do comedy skits. We do straight-up documentaries. Any sort of a method that we need to convey a story, we do it. And you can find us at pacificnorthweird.com. That will link you right to our YouTube page. Please subscribe if you go there, and share our videos if you like them.
Well, yeah, and I can't wait for the Squirrel Fest video that is probably going to come out of this down the road, because if people have not seen the Biggie Got Foot video, music video, they've got to go check it out at Pacific NorthWEIRD, because you've got some talent there, buddy.
Thanks, Michael. Biggie Got Foot is a parody that I wrote of Sir Mix-a-Lot's Baby Got Back. And it's my debut as a rapper, and I am rapping about Bigfoot. And it is pretty silly, but I like it.
Yes, and you recruited a real great cast to go along with that, not only including the Bigfoot, but some lovely ladies and scantily clad, I remember.
Oh, well, Michael, when you do a rap video, you have to have scantily clad women in fur bikinis, gyrating suggestively towards Sasquatch. That's the type of music video I want. So.
Yeah, and let me emphasize fur bikinis. Those are great. So you're going to the concert tonight, and then is it over tomorrow, or do you spend the night there? What are you going to do tonight?
Well, today is the one and only Squirrel Fest. It ends tonight, and then I will be heading back to Olympia, Washington, where I'll be starting to work more on our Lewis County month, which is coming up in November. And we are releasing 4 videos throughout that month, all about very strange stories to come out of Lewis County, Washington. One of which is called The Nudists from Venus, which recounts a UFO alien report from a man named Samuel Eaton Thompson back in March 28, 1950, where he wandered into the woods near Morton, Washington, and discovered a flying saucer populated by a large group of naked people from the planet Venus. And they took him aboard his ship and told him all about the secrets of the universe. And oh my God, just outside my window, there is a squirrel right now.
Oh, nice.
The first actual squirrel I have seen at the UFO festival, and I am so excited now.
Oh my goodness, you're seeing Sandy B. Nutter as we speak, it sounds like.
I am. Wow, this is Night Dreams Talk Radio that makes miracles happen.
Hey, Michael, your guest is on the line waiting.
Oh, wonderful. Well, thank you, Vince, for coming on tonight and bringing us up to speed on the Squirrel Fest down there in Longview. And we will be talking to you next week, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
All right, enjoy it out there.
Thanks, Michael. Have a great night.
You too. Well, and now we are going to bring on our next guest. And the main topic of tonight's show is a paranormal mystery author by the name of Liz Reeder. And Liz is a fantastic writer, as well as being an ex-law enforcement officer that writes about paranormal activity, and the 51 book series is what her books are called. So I'd like to bring Liz on right now and introduce you to everyone. Hello, Liz.
Hello.
There you are. Thank you for holding there through the last part of Vince Ynzunza's Pacific NorthWEIRD report, where he actually saw a squirrel at Squirrel Fest.
I really don't even know what to say about that.
Yeah, I was. Go ahead.
Yeah, we have some interesting festivals where I live, so Squirrel Fest actually sounds fun to me.
Well, yes, I understand you do have some interesting celebrations down there as well. Well, first of all, let's tell everyone where you actually reside and a little bit about kind of the place that you live in without describing it completely. But you're kind of out in the hinterlands there, I understand.
I live in the middle of nowhere. I live between Fort Leonard Wood and the Lake of the Ozarks.
Wow.
So, middle of nowhere. My nearest town is about 12 miles from me.
Right, and 12 miles to the nearest town and the nearest Wi-Fi, I understand, too.
Yes, my only option for internet is either cell phone or satellite, and satellite's outside my budget, so I have a nice little Wi-Fi hotspot through my cell phone company.
Wonderful, yeah. And, of course, Fort Leonard Wood is in which state?
It is in Missouri.
There you go. And you actually reside where? Just in the general state area?
Southwest Missouri.
Got it. All right. Just wanted people to kind of get a picture in their minds of where this famous author of the Paranormal Strange is actually residing here. And this is going to be a fun interview tonight, so thank you for coming on, first of all. I really enjoy the idea that you've come up with a kind of like a woman hero that is actually a county sheriff in the book series. Isn't that right?
Yes. Yes. It starts off with she had been injured while she was a deputy at the sheriff's department, and the previous sheriff, who she eventually took over for, did not like the way she wrote the report. He wanted her to say something happened that did not happen, and she refused to do it, so she was fired. And she was just recovering from the injuries and getting ready to, go back into law enforcement. And two of the county commissioners knock on her door and say, hey, we have a problem. Sheriff basically resigned in the middle of the night, and no one will step in. will you step in until someone can be appointed? And it goes from there.
Oh, wow. That's a great way to start out a book series for sure. So basically, you're kind of writing about, they always tell you anyway, when you're trying to be an author, you write about what you know and what you like. And you were a law enforcement officer yourself. Isn't that right?
I was a police officer over 16 years.
Wow. Where were you in the same general area where you served in the force?
I was in the same general area. I worked for a few towns in Pulaski County, and then I also worked for Sheriff's Department in Pulaski County as a deputy, Laclede County, and Miller County, which, if anybody who's watched the show Ozark, that is where that show is set, and I was a deputy in that county.
Oh, that'd be so you've got some inside information and experience to write a book in this regard. How did you decide that you wanted to put these thoughts and stories down on paper? Was this something you've always done, or did you just do it when you got to the retirement age or whatever you are now?
Well, I'm 40, so I'm not really retirement age. I had some injuries and illness that forced me to retire. And with those things, I have flares where I will have a lot of pain, and basically I'm confined to the couch with cold packs and really can't do a lot. So I needed something so I felt useful, like I had a purpose again. And I came up with this crazy idea and thought, you know what, I'm finally going to do this and write it down. And I wrote the first book in actually under 3 weeks.
Oh, interesting. So was this something that was in the back of your mind, the story that you wanted to start off with, or did it, some authors say that they try to plan everything out ahead of time and make an outline of what they want to write. Some other people say, I just sit down at the old keyboard and I just kind of start hammering things out and it kind of develops from there. How did you start the process?
I plan absolutely nothing. I go line by line and just kind of let things flow. The general idea came about in the summer of 2016. Everything was Bigfoot. Every show, every movie, it was everywhere. And I decided to look up local incidents and see if there were any local sightings and things. And the one that really stood out was one that was actually on the military base, on a specific trail. And it was during morning it was during morning PT, and this one soldier had an encounter, and he kind of brushed it off as people playing a prank on him because he was new. And it was basically tree knocks and whistles and different things inside the trail, inside the track, and then outside of it, because this is basically a gravel path through the woods. And when he got to the end, several of the group had already finished, and they just kind of offhandedly were joking, yeah, it looks like Bigfoot was paying us a visit again this morning. And he was just kind of blown away. And about 2 weeks after I found that story online, and that had happened a couple of years prior, the base put out an alert saying that specific trail was closed until further notice after a black bear sighting. They were saying safety concerns, closed the trail, and it's like, that's it, Bigfoot closed the trail. They're hiding Bigfoot on the base. Okay, that's the story. And it just progressed from there.
Oh my goodness. So this is spurred by an actual event that you read about in the newspaper where soldiers are actually seeing what others are saying could be Bigfoot. So some people around that area must have heard of these legends in the past, sounds like.
There are actually quite a few sightings in this area. A lot don't get reported because, you know, they don't want people to think they're crazy. But my mother was recently speaking to someone who had been stationed on the base years ago, and she was telling him about my book and what, you know, that it was about the base and Bigfoot, and he's like, I know exactly what she's talking about because I saw some of the stuff and I know what's there. But of course, it had never been reported because, you know, you don't want to interfere with your military career and have people think you're crazy.
Yeah, wow, that is interesting. And this is an Army base, Air Force base. What kind of a base is this in your area there?
It is an Army base.
All right. And was there any occasion at all for you in law enforcement to have any interaction with this Air Force or this base at that point?
We actually interact with it quite a bit, but I also have clearance to go on the base. My late husband was military, so I can go on the base easily.
Ah, yeah. So that obviously gives you some familiarity with how things work on a military base and how this interesting. So did you decide to weave in this biological experimentation happening on the base yourself, or had you heard about something like that in the past?
That's something that I just decided to put in there. Instead of having an Area 51 where it is all aliens and UFOs, have it be cryptids and failed genetic experiments and different things that have been collected and are either being housed there because they're too dangerous to leave out for to have contact with the general populace, or for their own safety in some cases. Yeah.
Wow. And had you yourself been interested in like the paranormal during your career as a law enforcement officer, or was this something that you picked up just because you read that article?
I have always loved the paranormal. That was something that I grew up with, always watching shows and hearing stories about, you know, haunted houses and encounters and things that had happened with my own family members. So that's always been a part of my life. And I actually grew up in a house that was most likely haunted, or at least the property was haunted. So, you know, I grew up with paranormal and different things. So that's always been a part of my life.
Well, yeah, it sounds like at least you've got some experience for this kind of genre, anyway. And have you written anything prior to this? Did you like to do short stories or any kind of things that you would publish in the past before you did these book series?
Never. Even in school, in grade school and high school, it was a matter of how much do I have to write and still get an A. That was the goal, was to get an A, but to write as little as possible to do it. I hated to write.
Yeah, and obviously nowadays do you keyboard or do you handwrite everything at this point?
I keyboard.
And of course, that is something that you either have to learn young or you have to acquire later in life. How was it for you learning how to keyboard? I remember in my high school, for some reason, I decided to take a typing class. Ended up being like the best thing I ever did as far as, being able to use a skill after high school. Are you there, Liz?
I'm here.
Oh, good. Yeah. So did you pick up the keyboard skills later on in life, or was that something you always had?
I always did at least some typing. I picked them up probably really when I started into law enforcement, was doing a lot of reports and things. And for a brief time, I was actually one of those annoying people who calls you and says, and, you know, tries to get you to take the surveys. And you have to be able to type exactly what the person says into the comments at the speed they're telling you. So I had to learn really fast.
Well, that'll do it. It's even harder than stenography, where you're creating symbols as you go. You have to write every word down. That's interesting. Yeah. So the whole idea of you wanting to write this book, is it something that you kind of have decided that you needed to do because of your physical condition, that you've been forced to be less mobile, or was this something that you probably would have done in any case, you know, at this point in your life?
It was definitely because of my injuries. I hate the fact that I can't be as active as I was, and I have like lift restrictions, and I'm told all the things that I cannot do, and instead of what I can do. And if I ask, you know, so what can I do? The answer is, I don't know. Whatever doesn't hurt. Well, when it hurts to breathe on certain days, that makes it a little hard to follow that rule. So I really, activity kind of purpose.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's do this, if you will. Will you kind of describe, first of all, the main protagonist character in your book, and tell us a little bit about you know, her and basically some of the background that you said that she was a deputy, and then all of a sudden steps into the head position there.
Right. Her name is Lindsay Gold, and she just kind of gets dropped into this. You know, she thinks, okay, I'm going to take over as sheriff. There's going to be all the administrative and all that stuff that is not fun but necessary. And she walks into it and realizes a few days in, one, something is very wrong with all of the paperwork that has been filed with the state by the sheriff, who has quit unexpectedly. Things are completely wrong. She has to redo everything. Investigations start on the state level with that. And then she starts to get these calls into the sheriff's department about monsters and these things happening, that she just kind of sits back and thinks, no, there's no way this is happening. They must be out drinking or you know, smoking something and seeing these things. They can't be real. And then when a teenager comes into the sheriff's department injured by one of them, she realizes we have a problem.
Yeah. And obviously, does she have to convince her colleagues that this is something that they need to investigate, or do some of her colleagues in the book already know what's going on? I don't know.
No one outside of her husband knows what's going on, and he's telling anything. He's acting like he has no clue what's going on for a while, until things start to progress and they realize, okay, this is putting people in danger. I have to say something. And he starts to tell a little bit to the sheriff that, okay, something may have happened, so these calls might go on for a while. And if you get these calls into the sheriff's department, just do a quick little write-up, say where it happened, when it happened, generally what it was. Don't go in details, and tell me what it is and hand it to me. I'll take care of it. And so, I mean, it's pretty obvious he knows what's going on, but he's not telling anyone.
And does Lindsay have an inkling that he knows what's going on, or does it take quite a while for her to figure out that he might be involved somehow?
Oh, she's pretty quick to figure out he has something to do with it, but she doesn't say much about it because they do have that understanding. Everything, since their first date, she has known everything he does is classified. He can't talk about it, so she's not asked questions. She's understood that and kind of let it go, but she understands really fast that he has something to do with it. As soon as he says there's an incident on the base, he knows exactly what's going on.
And that is because he is military, or he is a federal officer knowing what's going on. I can't remember the specifics about what his background was.
He is former military, but he is in charge of the program on the base that has caused this whole problem. And he kind of refers to it as the agency, the program, his facility, that kind of thing. And his title is agent, just to clarify. And, that way he can say he's public relations, he's working, something like that. He introduces himself as Agent Gold.
Agent Ren Gold, right? Is that his first name?
Yes, Ren.
And that's, how do you spell that?
W-R-E-N.
Yeah, interesting name. How did you come up with that name?
That's one of those where it's kind of a good question. I wanted something different and a name that was short, but also that could be kind of an abbreviation for this big, long, ostentatious name that he obviously hates and never goes by it. So his full name is Renfield, which is a family name, and he hates it, and so he goes by Ren. Very
good. Have you known any Renfields in your own life? Is this something that you brought out of the past yourself, or do you just kind of hear it and decide to adopt it?
I have never met anyone with the name Renfield, so I'm not entirely sure where it came from.
It sounds to me that you are the type of writer that I like to emulate as well, where you just sit down and you have a quiet moment and you just kind of throw some words on the paper, and all of a sudden it kind of leads you on a path that you not necessarily know ahead of time where you're going. And these kinds of names and characters almost kind of invent themselves as you go. Is that been your experience?
Absolutely. I plan nothing. When it gets to the point of where someone calls in to report that there's been a creature or something sighted, I have to stop and come up with a name for the person, and also in many cases stop and think, okay, what kind of creature do I want this to be? And actually make that up as I'm writing the story.
Yeah. Wow, that's quite a, I think that's the really pure way to write, without some preconceived ideas or formats or outlines. It's almost as if you're just kind of downloading information and inspiration as you go. And it's amazing what kind of comes out on the paper. Sometimes you wonder, where did that come from, I would imagine.
Oh, absolutely. And there are times where I've been writing something and I read it and I start laughing, or something. It's like how did I even come up with that? But it's worked. So I've left it in, and it goes from there.
Now, you mentioned that you wrote the first book. Let's mention the title to the first book, by the way. Let's do that now.
The first book is 51 The Beginning.
The Beginning. And by the way, let's explain to the audience where the term 51 came for your book title and how you came about naming it that.
51 came about as the idea that Area 51 in reality is not the base in the desert housing aliens and UFOs. It is, in fact, a secret facility in Missouri that houses cryptids and supernatural forces and genetic experiments gone wrong. And, so there's two completely separate ideas for what Area 51 is.
Yes. And is this program at all on this military base named with 51 or any kind of a connection with Area 51 at all? There is no name to the program. It is one of those that is just completely quiet. There's no official name. There's no official title. It's just the agency, the program, the facility, that kind of thing. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's kind of a mysterious title. I kind of like that. So each book starts with the title 51, and then you have kind of almost a subtitle along with them, right? The Beginning is the first one.
Right. And 51, The Storm, is the second one.
Wow.
51, Monsters, is the third. 51, Secrets, is book 4, which this week. And 51 Damages is the fifth and final book in the series.
Wow. And basically you come up with those kinds of names, as you are writing the books, but have you not written Damages yet? So you've just kind of thought of the title ahead of time?
The entire series is complete. I finished the series. I wrote the series from September of 2016 to August of 2017. I wrote a 5-book series in 11 months.
Oh my goodness! And that was.
And it's been sitting on my computer.
Yeah. And the first book you mentioned was written very fast. Was that something that you did all day long, all night long? How did you create a book in a short 3-week period?
It was a matter of when I was awake and I didn't feel like I was doing anything, so I needed to do something. And sitting and writing the book gave me that thing to do. Yeah, that's quite a grueling schedule to be able to sit there and do that. Was this something that was difficult for you to do, even with your issues with the pain as well? I know it'd be tough for me to sit that long. It wasn't, because I write at the same pace that most people speak or read. So wow. It goes really fast when I start. I actually wrote the first book of the prequel series last month. Oh, yes. So now you are concentrating on an entire prequel series. Is that right? Yes.
And can you go ahead?
This will give the backstory of Lindsay and Wren and 3 of the deputies before they came to work at the sheriff's department together after she took over as sheriff.
Oh, interesting. So in other words, some of these characters knew each other when they were younger, for instance?
Lindsay, Bob Smith and Bob Littlejohn and Max Cartwright all worked together in law enforcement in the same area. So they've known each other for many, many years prior to her taking over as sheriff.
Interesting.
And that's part of what makes it interesting within the sheriff's department, because they do know each other and can play off of the strengths and weaknesses that they each have and things like that.
Yeah. Matter of fact, it's interesting. You wrote 2 Bobs in as characters, right? I think there was a
I did.
behind that. Tell us why you decided to do the my other brother Daryl kind of thing in your book.
That's exactly it. Named Larry, this is my brother Daryl and my other brother Daryl. Yes. I remember that show very well. It was one of my favorites.
Yes, there was, for the folks out that don't know, this was the old Bob Newhart show. And it was a great comedy show because Bob Newhart is a fantastic comedian, but I think it was set up in the Northeast, someplace like Maine or Massachusetts, and he had a cabin kind of lodge, and these 2 guys were working for him named Daryl, and the other guy would be Daryl, and he'd introduce him as his other brother Daryl. I never figured that out, but I thought it was hilarious.
Right. Well, I've worked in several departments where we have multiple officers with the same first name.
Ah, there you go.
Almost without fail, it has been big and little whoever. So I had to put that in where you have little Bob and big Bob. It had to go in there somewhere.
Yeah, I think that's even better than Billy Bob, or those kinds of things. So, very good. Matter of fact, as you write these novels and your stories, do you have in the back of your mind the idea of who you might want to play these characters, or the kind of actor or the look that you're looking for?
I don't. And that's the thing. When you read the books, you will see that I give very vague physical descriptions of people. Because I have read amazing books, but they give such detailed physical descriptions of the characters that it kind of loses me. I can't relate to that person.
Yeah.
They're being described. So I just kind of give a very vague description, and that way everybody can fill in with, I know this guy. Yeah, that's my neighbor. Or, oh, I went to school with that woman. I know who that is. So they can kind of relate and put in who they feel is right for that.
Yeah, that's that's what that is I believe that's respecting your readership, allowing them to use their own imaginations and the theater in their minds to develop your characters. And obviously, every person that reads your books have a different idea in the back of their brain what exactly the story looks like in their head, I would imagine.
Right. And I've had a couple of people contact me about being like, I don't know if you would work or not, because I don't know what the characters look like. Even myself, I'm kind of like, I don't know, maybe. Well, I'll think about it. So that's why the first series there's actually no people on any of the covers.
Yes, right. Which is kind of ominous in itself, given the fact that you're dealing with biological experiments going bad, right?
Yes.
And, you know, your story, your background story of this military base and these biological experiments almost remind me of a Dulce, New Mexico kind of theme in the background, where everyone has kind of heard about those stories of potential underground bases with aliens or hybrids or, you know, biological, you know, programs going on. Had you known about the Dulce, New Mexico stories when you started the project?
I have, and I've heard about even of there being a secret underground. The entire on Fort Leonard Wood, there's a big secret underground secondary base.
Oh,
there's not, but yeah, there's a claim out there. I actually found it online a few months ago that I didn't even know existed. But it's like, okay. Yeah, I grew up listening, watching the different shows about the conspiracy theories and about the different secret installations and things like that. So I'm sure that was kind of in the back of my mind, but I wasn't thinking, oh, I'm going to base it on this specific base or, you know, this specific topic.
Yeah. No, but you've been very skillful in weaving in those ideas of secret military bases, potentially underground, you know, facilities, and the whole cryptid idea. I don't know if it's specifically like a Bigfoot, you know, as far as the you know, the monsters go, but I would imagine you've got more than one monster in this series.
There are around 35 different ones mentioned or encountered in the 5-book series.
Oh my goodness!
And, and a creature, actually an entire group of them, is encountered often. I don't want to say often in each book, but they are at least mentioned in each book. There are encounters in each book with them, and one of them is very important. He plays a very important role by the time everything is over.
Oh, interesting. Now, is this the kind of antagonist or antagonists, you know, plural, that you throw in there, that you flesh out throughout the book series and give them a little bit more of a sympathetic character, or are they all just, you know, crazy and out to kill people?
It depends. Some of them are just murderous. You know, if they see a person, they will do their best to kill it. I mean, that's what they do. That's why they were being held captive on the base. That was the sole purpose, was to protect the population from those creatures. There are others that are in the book that are completely harmless, that it's a matter of more protecting them than the people around them.
Oh, interesting. So you've got a wide range of these monster characters that you get to describe and go crazy with in your own imagination, it sounds like, and put down on paper.
Right. Right. I even came up with a poltergeist that is actually a more of a hive type entity, where if you only have one, it can move a pencil, but if you have a dozen, they can throw things across the room.
Oh, now that is a very interesting thought to begin with. because maybe that's something that we should be thinking about when it comes to, kinetic activity and poltergeist. Maybe maybe there takes a group of them to do something. Where did you come up with that idea of the hive poltergeist?
I honestly have no idea. I mean, I might have been watching something on Discovery Channel about bees and thought, oh, a hive, that's a good idea. And that's where it came from. I really don't remember where it came from.
Yes. Well, I think that's quite creative. That's wonderful. Now, throughout the book series, can we expect to see these monsters or these biological, hybrids or whatever you want to call them throughout the series, or is it pretty much in the beginning and then you go on to other things? Because you've got different titles, of course, to your books.
The creatures are throughout. The only one that is consistent in all of the books is the Bigfoot creature. All of the others, it's an initial encounter or a sighting or something, and then that is dealt with and it's moved on. They might be mentioned later, but not additional encounters with them. Yes.
All right. And I remember they can obviously look on Amazon and your website to find out the covers to the books. But wasn't the first cover on the beginning, wasn't that a Sasquatch on the cover of that book?
Yes. I had a friend who's made this actually drew that cover for me.
That is great.
The plan is to actually do an illustrated field guide of all the creatures, and he will be the illustrator for it.
Oh, that would be a companion for all the novels. Then that'd be cool, really nice.
Yeah, that's in the works. It will probably be a while before that is out, but that is definitely in the works.
Yeah. Well, do you want to name your artist friend and give her a little credit for what she's done so far?
I won't, simply because he is full-time active duty law enforcement, and that he prefers to kind of keep his name off of things. Because here he works.
Yeah, I see. I understand. Which makes that kind of doubly interesting. That obviously he's a fantastic artist and also a law enforcement officer at the same time. That's really great. I think that's kind of like a little intrigue there going on behind the scenes.
He actually sent me a picture of a painting he did today. He's doing a series of the Avengers for Children's Hospital, and he sent me a picture of the Captain America that he painted. So,
wow! So he's a busy artist. Then is it this kind of thing that he would be able to show at various art shows, or is he just always trying to stay behind the scenes when he does this at this point?
Right now, it's a little more behind the scenes.
Yeah.
Hopefully, he's expecting to retire in the next, couple years, and he's really hoping that he can kind of transition over to art.
Yeah. Wow. You got to do what you really enjoy, because it's so rewarding, as you found out, of course, in your writing. I just thought of something. The idea that this is a county sheriff in a situation that has some strange things going on in their jurisdiction. Did you ever watch, or have you ever watched those Longmire series on Netflix with the county sheriff Longmire?
I loved Longmire, and I do not have Netflix. So when it switched from the network it was on to Netflix, I was heartbroken.
Yes.
So I missed like the last 2 seasons of it. It's like, I need to know what happened.
Exactly. Oh my goodness! And the characters are so great on that show. I would imagine they might have inspired you a little bit with some of the background, as far as you put into your characters as well.
I'm sure they did. I pull inspiration from everything that I see and I hear and I read and that I've done, people that I've met. I'm sure that all of that has been incorporated in some way, even if I'm not conscious that I've done it.
Yes. Yeah, I'm assuming that we all do that, throughout our creative lives, as we bring in our experiences and kind of the things that we've always thought would be important to show our readers and as an artist, show the people that watch see their paintings and those kinds of things. But gosh, this is very exciting for a person like yourself, I would imagine, to be actual published author. How did you actually go about getting that book from off your computer and actually into a hardcover, or a softcover book, and out to the public? How does that work for you?
Sorry, I'm hearing footsteps beside my car.
Oh no!
And I'm kind of looking to see what it is, but I don't see anything. So that might even be a little more disturbing.
Yes.
I really wasn't sure I was going to do anything with it when I wrote it. It was more of, I just needed something to do. And I gave it to a friend and said, will you please read this and tell me honestly what you think? And she said, I love it. You need to publish this. And I started looking into submitting to publishing houses for full publish. And most of them would not accept it. They just flat said, we are not accepting any submissions of any type.
Yeah.
So then I moved on to self-publish, and I looked into it, and that's something you have to pay for to have it done. And I was completely clueless on how to do any publishing. I had no idea what formatting was. I had no idea the process for designing covers or anything like that. So I went ahead and I did pay to have the first one published. And I used Archway Publishing, which is a branch of Simon & Schuster.
Ah.
And with them, I had to pick the least expensive publishing package, which for most people would not be that big of a deal. But for me, even coming up with that amount of money was tough. But I went ahead and I did it, and I published it, and they were great. They did it print, they did it in ebook, they did the distribution, they did, finished the cover, they did everything for me. The one thing they did not do was editing, but I had an edited copy, so I was fortunate. So I didn't have to worry about that. And then I've been sitting on the second book for almost a year. For about a year. And I can't afford to pay to have it published. So it's like, what am I going to do? Do I just ignore this? So I went to Amazon and looked, and you can publish for free. They give you the royalties and give you the templates and say, this is how you do it, and best of luck to you. And it's like, this is my answer. this is how I'm going to get the rest of the series out, because I had been having people ask, when is the next book coming out? When is the next book? And it's like, I don't know. It's done, but I don't know. And each book kind of has a cliffhanger ending until the last book. So, you get to that end and it's like, what happens next? So my answer was to use Amazon and to publish that way.
Well, I think that is very smart to do. Matter of fact, that seems to be the wave of the future with publishing. I'll tell you some of my horror stories as well. Is that I probably had at least 100 rejection letters. When I went out to the traditional publishing houses to try to send manuscripts to. And it gets a little disconcerting after a while when you're right, you get the letter back, for one thing, is even an exciting thing, because most of them don't even send you a letter back. But if you do, then they say they're not accepting manuscripts, or a few of them asked for maybe 2 or 3 pages out of a chapter. I don't know if you ever experienced that, but every once in a while you'll actually get someone who wants to read something that you read.
Right. Then you have to pick. Usually it's like 1,000 words. Send us 1,000 words.
Yeah.
Well, that 1,000 words does not explain a book. It just can't do it.
Exactly. And which part of the story do you pick out of your manuscript to send them for 1,000 words? That will drive you nuts right there, trying to figure out what they might be looking for and what you should send them.
Exactly.
And the idea of Amazon, is really a great way to go. Did you perchance use the CreateSpace, format that Amazon kind of uses as well to actually create the book itself, or how did you actually come up with the format of your book?
I use CreateSpace. And the advantage, one thing I did not know about Amazon, you can actually do expanded distribution with Amazon. Right now, my first 3 books, all 3 of them, including the 2 that I published with Amazon, are available on barnesandnoble.com.
Yes.
So, how could I not, how can you go wrong with that? And by doing the expanded, it's still free, and bookstores can order it, libraries, schools, private businesses can stock it. It makes sense to do it that way. Yeah,
it does. It is just amazing, the distribution that you can do, or at least have available to anyone, even though you can't put out a whole lot of money up front. You can, even buy copies of your own book at a very low discounted rate. If you want to, pass some out, or you want to sell them to, other people, you can actually get, a nice box of books that you get to keep in your closet if you'd like.
Right, and I keep books, because I do sell them on my website separately from Amazon and the different links that I have set up. But I also do events and Comic-Cons and things like that. So having that as an option is something I had to have.
And how have you found it being a published author now? Is it kind of exciting or fun to be able to get contacted by some folks who, like myself, I want to interview you over my radio show, or I'll bet some people like you to come and maybe do some book signings at bookstores and, or like you said, conferences as well. Is that been fun for you?
It feels really strange. I'm not used to being in the public eye, being in law enforcement, being in emergency services, you go do what you need to do and you leave. You don't have a lot of press. You don't have a lot of attention normally. And to be contacted to do things like this show and to do book signings and going to Comic-Cons, it feels very, very strange.
Well, let me ask you this, Liz, is how do you handle it when a fan comes up to you and wants you to sign their book? That's got to be a flattering thing.
I will let you know when that happens.
Oh, you're too modest.
I've had, I do sign them when I'm at the Comic-Cons and they buy the book from me, but I've never had anyone come to me with a copy they already have and say, "Can you sign this?"
Yeah. Well, I'm sure that is going to happen not too far in the future with all of these wonderful novels. Matter of fact, can you give the listeners out there an idea of how many pages do you consider a book, or how do you actually determine how long your book is going to be?
I usually aim between 60 and 65,000 words. That puts it around, well, actually it depends on the format. The first book had about 65,000 words and wound up being 237 pages. The books on Amazon are all about the same length, but are around 300 pages.
Yeah.
So, I do shoot kind of for that middle, 60 to 65,000 words, but it really is a matter of where the story goes and what is a good stopping point, and how will that pick up to the next.
So, in other words, when you are deep into a novel, you do have maybe in the back of your mind where you would like the next story to pick up? Is that kind of how you determine when to stop the one you're working on?
A little yes and a little no. I will get to a point where it's like, oh, I know how the next book needs to start.
Ah.
But that's as far as it gets. I will get to a point, to a chapter, and it's like, oh, this is going to be where the beginning of the next book is. This is going to be important. This is going to be a big thing in the next book. But usually that's pretty close of the book I'm working on.
Yeah. Wow. That is interesting.
And each book has a very different tone, which I hadn't planned on, but they really, the first book, of course, is the beginning, so everything is, how everything started. And I put that up thinking, okay, there's going to be the winter is going to be a big part of it, but then there's a lot of turmoil between Lindsay and Ren because of what was going on. He was not telling her, and there was an encounter that could have been fatal to one of her deputies. Actually, a couple of encounters to different deputies that could have been fatal. And she's like, I'm done. You need to tell me. I'm done. And so there's more than just the actual storm. There was an emotional storm with it. And that was not planned. That just kind of worked its way in. Monsters, there's several things that there were no record of on the base. So now they're encountering these these true monsters that they have no record of, no idea where they've come from, and the additional monster of her mother-in-law, which sounds bad, but you know, this woman is like, she is like the terror of the nightmare mother-in-law. Take every possible bad thing that could be in a mother-in-law, and it's her. I mean, you know, so monsters, it really came about human and other in that one.
Yeah. Very interesting analogy there. I think some people
well, you know,
relate to that.
Yeah, I mean, but it's not just the mother-in-law. You know, they discover that something has been created. You know, one of these creatures has been created. So whoever created this thing is also a monster because it should have never been created. So it really all ties in together with, you know, there are human monsters, there are non-human monsters, there's, you know, a lot in there. Secrets, which is the one that is coming out hopefully this week, Lindsay has kept a lot of secrets from Rin because, you know, she has helped members of the Sheriff's Department along the years with personal and professional things, and she is just not told because it was a matter of, okay, if this gets out, your marriage, your career, your life is over. So, you know, let's just not ever speak of this again. And of course, Rin has kept things from her because he had to. And, you know, that kind of begins to come into play, and then they realize her first husband had a lot of secrets, and those start to come up. And, you know, there's a lot of things in there that title came about close to the end of the book, but it very much sums up what it is, you know, and all of these secrets are coming back, and they're just wreaking havoc now.
Wow, and it sounds to me that you're weaving in these personal stories very well into the mystery that they're having to deal with. So in other words, these characters are many layered in themselves. They're not only dealing with strange things, they have histories that they're dealing with as well.
Absolutely. And the history that Lindsay has with her late husband, that is a huge part of the entire situation, and that really comes into play in the fifth book, which is Damages, where with everything that has happened, they just kind of have to stop and by the time it's over, just assess the damages and try to repair everything.
Yes, and doesn't that mirror a lot of our lives? You know, I don't know if it mirrors your life at all, but you know, we all bring personal experiences into our craft, I would imagine. And is that something that you're able to do as well?
I think to some point, I try to not a lot of, first, especially if it's, I try to not be a person as a character.
Yeah.
That could potentially come back to bite you if you do that.
Sure.
So I really try to avoid doing that.
You did mention that Lindsay's first husband, did he die? Is that how they ended their marriage, or was this, how did he meet his demise?
He died, and that's kind of part of the mystery. You know, it was ruled as that comes up book two. Yes, book 2. I'm trying to keep track of everything. I think it may even be book 3. It's book 3 where it comes up. It's past my bedtime. What can I say? But it comes up in book 3 that he might possibly be tied into some of this. You know, some of what's going on in some of these creatures and some of the activity. And his death was ruled as accidental animal attack.
Ah. Yes.
And it was a matter of when he died, Lindsay contacted his family to, plan funeral and everything, and they pretty much said, you know what, it's your fault he's dead. We want nothing more to do with you, and we will take care of it. And that was it. They cut her off. She never got to have a funeral for him. There was nothing. Just cut off completely. And that also ties into it because according to them, they blamed her for his death. Somehow her being in law enforcement is what caused his death.
Oh my goodness, that is quite a twist that you've thrown in there, and I can see in the back of my mind right now that if I was doing this as another author, I might throw in a little bit of background history between the two spouses, the two husbands. Did they? I don't know if you are able to tell us, but did they have any relationship at all? Did they know each other?
Absolutely none. Absolutely none. There are some connections between people they know or knew. They themselves never met, never had any interaction or contact.
Got it. Yeah. Wow, that's fascinating stuff. And basically, how did you come about the idea that this Lindsay Gold was going to have 2 relationships, or does she have more relationships in the book series after that?
Only the 2. I think that's part of my life because I wound up with an ex-husband and remarried. But that is so common in law enforcement to have a divorce or something happen and have multiple relationships, multiple marriages. So I thought that was a good thing to throw in because there are very few storybook relationships that last, years and years and years now, unfortunately. So I wanted to put that in where she had a relationship previously, and she actually has a son, and so Ren, stepfather, and kind of took over with that.
Oh yeah, well, gosh, I can relate to that. I'm a stepfather, and then 3 other children myself, so I know how that goes. But that gives a lot of depth to your characters for sure. And obviously, you've got some experience as far as your relationships goes that you're bringing to the table when you write these novels as well. Is this kind of a thing that would be, for instance, a man would be interested in this book as much as a woman, or do you kind of write for a specific gender or genre?
I wrote it for anyone who is interested in sci-fi, conspiracy theories. I wrote it in such a way that I'm not really graphic when it comes to attacks or any type of intimate relationship in the book. Because I wanted kids to be able to read it too. it's not hard for adults to sit and read it and figure out exactly what a phrase means, or, you know, these little hints or something. We can figure that out, but hopefully a kid isn't going to understand it quite as clearly.
Yes.
I also I made a point of there's no profanity in them, because one thing I've always hated was I would read this really great book and I would think, oh, my son would love this, you know, but he would be younger, even though he would be, you know, perfectly capable of reading and understanding the book. There were parts in it I didn't want him to read.
Yes.
And that kind of ruined it. So I wanted to write something that the adults could read and decide if it was appropriate for their child, and have it be something where they didn't have to worry about sex scenes or, you know, graphic, you know, arms being ripped off or whatever, and everything being descriptive and profanity laced. It's something that they can hand to their young teenager and say, enjoy.
Well, that's quite admirable, actually, because I think it's sometimes they use those, you know, profanities and, you know, hot story ideas just for the sake of using them to try to sell more books. But I tell you what, you can do the same thing if you're a creative writer to keep your audience and to keep people interested in reading the books. So that's very admirable. Good for you.
Oh, thank you. I had someone tell me a few days ago that she's actually rereading the first book before she dives into the second one, and she's reading it with her 10-year-old.
Oh, my
she's
goodness.
Reading it out loud to her 10-year-old, because her 10-year-old loves monsters and creatures and scary stuff, and it's not so scary that it's going to bother her. So that made me feel good.
Well, that is wonderful. I mean, the idea that you know, you're writing an adult novel, but in a format where children are interested in the story. I mean, that just proves that you've got quite a storyline going there to keep young people interested. And you're right; they do love monsters and ghosts and those kinds of scary things, but they want to have a little bit of a boundary line where they're not going to have to worry about being, you know, really scared in the end of the thing, especially if their mother is there reading it to them. That's quite an honor, I think. Yeah,
that surprised me. And she's like, well, my child's a little different. It's like, no, that's awesome. You know, I read scary stories when I was a kid too, so that's awesome. The fact that she feels that it's appropriate.
Yes, definitely. Matter of fact, you know what, Liz? I think before I get any farther here, I need to ask you, for the audience out there, how you got those amazing blue eyes of yours. They don't know that over the radio, but you do have some really awesome blue eyes.
Oh, thank you. I can thank my mother's side of the family for that.
Oh, wonderful. Matter of fact,
both of my maternal grandparents have had those blue eyes, so I can definitely thank them for that.
Well, and you know, Sinatra was old blue eyes, and you're definitely the young blue eyes here. This is very nice.
I'm not that young. I'm 40, so I'm not that young.
Well, you look a lot younger than that in your photographs here, so you carry it well, believe me. Yeah. Speaking of your parents or your mother, are they interested in reading your books, or what do you tell your family about these things?
My mother has read all of the books. I would finish the book, not even edit it, and print it off and give it to her and, okay, tell me what you think. Do I need to change it? You know, tell me now. And she would read it, and it was, don't change anything. You know, just do your editing, but don't change anything. And my family is they're asking, when are you going to do a book signing? When is the next book out? I had cousins and different family members who were anxious to get the next book. So that feels pretty good.
Oh, definitely, especially when you have that kind of support from your family. Because I know some people out there, some writers specifically, that don't necessarily have the support of their spouses, the people they're in relationships with, their family members, and that makes it a lot harder to spend the time away from them. That's for one thing. A writer and writing is a solitary task.
I'm pretty solitary anyway. I am quite happy to stay at home for days and never leave my house, which drives most people crazy, but I'm happy with that. Give me Sci-Fi Channel or Discovery Channel, and I'll just leave that on in the background and do whatever. So, I'm good.
That is interesting that you mention that. The idea being that you have something going on in the background, for your writing. I know some people that do that, and they either have music. Some people will put on a certain genre of music that they like, and they kind of helps get them in the mood. But I have found out as well is that if you have something going in the background while you're getting in the zone of writing, it almost kind of helps with the process. Is that what you find?
Not really. I mean, I might be in the kitchen cooking dinner and have this huge idea, or realize as I'm standing there at the stove, I'm mumbling lines of a conversation that I need to put into the book. So for me, I just always have the TV on. That's just, that background noise just kind of helps me not overthink quite as much as I normally do.
Oh, good point.
So it does, yeah, I tend to overthink everything. My brain does not shut down, and that is an issue I have, especially when I'm having more pain. When I have more pain, my brain just absolutely goes crazy. I cannot stop thinking and come up with these crazy ideas, which is, I think, part of why most of my writing happens when I'm in pain, which most people are the opposite. If they're in pain, they shut down, they don't do things, they try to calm, and so
yes.
More proof that I'm a little different.
That's interesting. You fight the pain with creativity, it sounds like.
Yeah, that distraction, to try to focus on something else, and my brain's going to keep spinning no matter what I do, so might as well try to channel it into something.
Well, that's admirable in itself right there, because most people don't know how to control those kinds of emotions, whether they're good emotions or bad emotions. They just let them run amok. And of course, everyone says that 95% of our self-talk is negative anyway, and sounds like you're able to work through that and actually get things on paper that are productive.
I try to. I'll put it that way. I try to. I definitely have days that are not great and are rather negative, but I definitely try to flip that around. And even if I'm having one of those days, I try to turn it so, yeah, it's negative thoughts and negative emotions, but maybe direct it toward a specific character or, something like that.
Yes. That is, I think, probably what writers try to do. without the motivation of the actual physical pain. So it's amazing you can do that. You know, the interesting thing also I find fascinating is that the idea that a writer actually ends up having to rewrite and or edit. How do you handle that idea where you go back and you take a second look at things, or do you not worry about that and have another person do the editing of your stories?
I do all of my editing, and I'm actually getting ready to do the final read through of book 4 before I actually publish. That's the only thing I have left to do. But for me, it's not a matter of rewriting. It's a matter of changing maybe just the wording in a sentence, or, okay, this doesn't sound quite as clear as I want it to be, so let me change that little thing. I do not do any major rewrites or, rewrite chapters. I've heard some authors actually will go in and, I don't like this chapter at all, and they'll just scrap the whole thing and rewrite it. And I don't do that. With me, it's just
so I'm hoping you can still hear me there. I think you cut out a little bit, but can you hear me, Liz?
I can hear you.
Okay, good. It is fascinating to me that whenever I've written something and I put it aside for a day and I come back to it, it's almost as if I'm looking at something that someone else has written, and I get a different perspective on it. Have you experienced that as yourself?
I put things aside for usually a couple of weeks at least before I go back and I reread and change anything. I am super critical of everything I do. So if I don't set it aside and I almost forget what I've written, I instantly hate it and don't want it. Just even as I'm editing these books, I'm reading through them and I'm critical of every word that's on the page. Even though I have people asking me, when's the next book? Or, I loved the last book, or I love this character, I still doubt everything that's in each book. So I have to be really careful about going back and changing, and that's why I let it sit for days or even weeks to kind of separate myself from it a little bit, and go back in and look at it.
And do you find that more often than not, you have a better perspective the second time around when you go in and do this, and you're glad that you were able to review it before it was published?
I do. Again, I don't usually, even if it's something that seems like maybe I didn't like it, like maybe a character has done something, or something has happened that, I personally don't like, I still leave it. Unless it is something that just completely ruins the story.
Yeah.
So I try to not change very much after I write something. When I write it, I know I have an intention. As I'm putting everything down, I have specific intention of this is the story I want to tell. So I leave it.
Well, that takes some discipline to do that, I know, for sure, because sometimes you'll even pick up something that you've written that's already published, and you criticize yourself for it, and you just go, I wish I could do that over again, That's got to be a difficult situation sometimes.
I feel that way about every book. And that is why I don't change a lot of things, because if I start changing, I will just keep changing and keep changing and keep changing, and it will never get published.
Yes.
So I have to draw the line and say, nope, I will fix things. I will clarify things, grammar, missing words, rewrite a clumsy sentence, even add a few sentences to the story. I will not rewrite anything.
Well, that's a lot of discipline. Good for you. I just wanted to ask you as well, now that you've got this book series basically done, but now you're working on the prequel series. How are you finding that? Is that a difficult thing to do, to set aside a long storyline and kind of jump back in time?
It's not. The 51 series covers 1 year. That's it. 5 books in 1 year at a time. But prequels, it's like 15 years of time. So there's a lot of little individual stories, and the way I'm able to do it is because there are aspects. There's what's happening in Missouri with Lindsay and the sheriff's deputies and the police officers she knows, and what's happening with Rin and the military and the agency. I can write chapters of those stories. So it's easy to do. And I've actually had, ideas of, this would be a great chapter. And I go ahead and I write that chapter, but it's not going to be in a book until the 3rd book, 4th book, because it has to fit into a specific timeline. But it's a great story that involving that person.
Yes. Matter of fact, do you almost get the feeling that these books, especially maybe the prequel books, are already written and you are just kind of bringing them to life with the idea that you don't necessarily have to write in a certain timeline, in a certain way? You're just kind of putting down on paper the things that come to you, maybe disjointedly even.
I do feel that way to a point. As for the original series, I kind of had a bit of what happened in the past. There's just so much stuff that could have happened. There's no possible way that all of it could have been incorporated into one series. When you have Rin, who has worked in the military and the agency for over 15 years, dealing with all these creatures and entities, and then you have Lindsay and the other members of law enforcement doing their jobs for 15 years. That's a lot of stuff. So I couldn't put it all in one series. I had to do a prequel because there were so many people asking, well, okay, you mentioned this. What about this in this book? It's like I can't in because there's not enough room. They would be 2,000-page books by the time it was done, and it's just not. It's not possible. So
right.
That's what led to the prequel, because there's so many people asking, oh, I'd love to know about this because they've known each other a while. So what's the story with them? It's like I can't put all that in. I can give hints, but I can't put all that in. So, that's where the prequels came from. So the story's definitely written. It just needs to be on paper.
Yes, and gosh, it sounds to me that the prequels. What is your feeling? Do you think the prequels will be just as exciting as the book series, or do you think that it's just going to be a warm up for the book series?
Oh, it will be exciting. I've got things in there that the prequels might actually be more, how do I put it, they're grittier than the original series, there's going to be things in there that are going to rip your heart out and stomp on it. I mean, because it explains why each person is the way they are in the 51 series.
Right. In other words, it explains their motivation of what they're doing at the time, I would imagine, and how they got there.
Right. And things like the death of Lindsay's husband are going to be in depth. You know, those are going to be detailed out because that's important to why she is the way she is and part of why she's so protective of some of the people that she's protective of. Yes,
interesting. Well, I can't wait to start hearing and reading some of those pre series books that you're going to come up with, because I believe as you write and you do more and more of these series, you get better and better. I would imagine that these prequels will be even better and more compelling than the actual series itself, which is saying something, because the series is very compelling already. So that'll be a really fun project for people to follow the whole idea of this story from the beginning to the end. And I would imagine, well, let me ask you this. Here's an interesting idea. What if all of a sudden you get a call from a film studio that would be interested in putting these books in film format, and they want to talk to you about that? Would that be something that would interest you, and or how would you handle the idea of control when it comes to, film?
First, I would have to recover from the stroke, and then it would. I would really just have to talk to them and see what the ideas that they have are and see how they meshed. Because if they would want to change it to the point that the characters weren't what they are in the book, I would have a problem with that. But if they want to keep it close, but have it inspired by the books and close to the books, but add different things and maybe change some things, I would be okay with that, I think.
Well, good for you, because I know some writers get very possessive, of their characters, and of course you have to set some boundaries. But as long as you're willing to, hear them out in what they're kind of trying to portray, that would be admirable to at least listen to them and see what they want to do.
Yeah, and that's that goes back to also having characters that aren't specifically detailed out exactly what each one looks like. So, if they decided to cast people that I personally had never pictured as, these characters, I would still be okay with that, because maybe that's what they see. That's part of why I left it like that, so everybody could kind of picture who they felt was right.
Yeah, I think that's very smart. The idea being that you are playing upon everyone's creativity themselves in reading your books and adding to the perspective that you've actually written in their own minds. That's a good idea, I think. I wanted to ask you before we got any farther as well, is that, when you were a police officer yourself, was it police or was it sheriff's department that you actually worked at?
Both.
Oh.
Both. I worked small town police departments and county sheriff's departments.
And isn't it true that you're also first responder? Was it EMT or firefighter as well? What was that other profession?
I was an EMT for 10 years.
Oh my goodness, you have a well-rounded experience on everything there.
I became an EMT at 18 and was licensed and certified for 10 years, and I became a police officer at 22 and was licensed and commissioned for over 16 years.
My goodness, that is quite a career, and you're still a young woman, so that's great. Also, I was wondering, during that long career that you had in multiple, law enforcement and, paramedic agencies and things, did you ever have any paranormal calls that you went on yourself?
I really didn't. For some reason, when I was working, nothing ever seemed to happen. It was always when I was off duty. It's just the way it seems to always work. The closest thing would be I had just started with the police department, and I was riding with another officer with the department because we lived in the same area and kind of carpooled to that department. And we were driving through the national forest, of course, to get home, and completely isolated. There's not a house, a light for miles. And as we're driving down this stretch, there is an extremely bright flash of light off to the left of the car, off in the forest.
Is that right?
To the point that he was driving, he's like, "Did you see that?" It's like, "Yeah." And we turned around and went back thinking that it was some kind of strobe or, maybe a game camera that had flashed, which most game cameras don't use a flash like that, but, we thought maybe. And we backed all the way up, turned around, tried to make it happen again. We even got out of the car, shined lights into the forest, could not find anything. It did not happen again. It was just one extremely bright flash. I mean, like lightning flash. It was, I have no idea what it was still. To this day, I have no idea what it was.
And this was emanating from the forest off the side of the road, is that right?
Right. It was back in the woods, in part of the Mark Twain National Forest. And it was some distance off the road, which is why we didn't really think game camera, because it was so far off the road that it, the car headlights should not have triggered it. But even shining flashlights back into the area, if that was the case, it should have triggered it and it should have flashed again, and it didn't.
Yeah, and it was bright enough, obviously, to capture your attention. What color do you suppose, what was your impression on the color?
White to blue.
Interesting. And was it more of a laser kind of a light, or was this a diffused light that you might see with thunder or something like that?
We thought camera flash was what we thought, but it was too bright to even be a camera flash. There was no way that's what it was.
Yeah.
It was one of those, as we were driving, it's like, that could have been a camera flash. And then we start debunking that. It's like, yeah, that was way too bright to be a camera flash. There's no way that's what it was. So that's one of those mysteries that we have no idea what it was.
And you don't remember any missing time from that incident, or do you?
There was no missing time. Missing time. There was no nothing out of the ordinary except the bright flash of light that was unexplained.
Okay. Oh, that's fascinating.
Which was in the national forest on the southeast corner from the Army base. So,
Oh, it was. Well, there you go. Interesting.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There's all kinds of stuff that Yeah.
Well, and of course, you've probably read or at least heard about the David Paulides 411 Missing series books. About the whole idea of so many people vanishing basically without a trace in these national and state forests. Is that kind of an angle that you are exploring as well in your 51 book series?
No. No one goes missing. I do have that causes missing time, but goes missing. Nothing causes that unless something eats someone, which I don't even have that in there.
Yeah. Okay, very interesting. And, well, let me ask you straight up. Have you ever had a UFO sighting yourself? Or anything strange other than like a flash like that you might have seen in the night sky?
I've seen everything I've seen can usually be written off as activity from the base.
Yes. And
so I personally haven't seen anything that unusual or that couldn't be explained relatively easily.
And this includes probably other places that you've been other than the base. You still haven't seen anything that intrigues you in the night sky elsewhere?
Not really. Like I said, everything that I've seen is pretty easy to explain. I've seen a lot of meteors and different things as they flash and burn out, but nothing that could be considered a UFO.
Oh, interesting. And I assume you haven't actually seen a Bigfoot either in your career.
I have not. I have seen animals that I have no clue what they are, but never Bigfoot.
Oh, interesting. So you've seen some kind of cryptid or animal that you couldn't identify then?
I have, and it was actually before I went into law enforcement, and it was not work related. I was in a car with my mother, and we were going home. It was late at night, and this thing just trots across the road in front of us, and first thought was mountain lion.
Ah.
Now this is around 97, somewhere around 97. So we didn't really have mountain lions in this area, or at least not reported mountain lions.
Right.
So that was very strange. And it was not in a hurry. It wasn't running across the road. It just trotted across in front of us. And this is a relatively major road, so my mom had to slam on the brakes. There was no other cars, thankfully. But this thing turned and looked at us, and it stopped at the edge of the road, and it was not a mountain lion.
Oh my gosh.
Its bill was more like a cheetah, which that doesn't make sense because mountain lions are not built that way. It was not a mountain lion that was malnourished in any way, because the way it was standing, no ribs were visible. It was not skinny in any way, shape, or form, but it had that cheetah build with a very deep chest and thin abdomen. And the face was not right. It was cat-like, but it was also dog-like. There were wrinkles in the muzzle and in the face, and I still have no clue what it was. None to this day.
Oh, my goodness, yeah. That is that's an interesting sighting.
that also was within a very short distance of the National Forest.
There you go.
So,
yeah, those things are happening. I think many times in those national forests, state forests that people don't even understand, and we all need to be wary, of course. But I'll bet that really caught your mother's attention as well.
Oh, absolutely, and she remembers it to this day too. I mean, this is it, and she's the same way I am. We cannot explain it. We don't know what it was. And you have to understand, my mother especially, she grew up as a child in the 40s and 50s, and in a rural area. They didn't have electricity when she was a child. You know, they got water out of a cistern. So she grew up knowing every animal, everything that could possibly be in the woods or be a threat or, you know, whatever. And then she taught me, and my dad taught me, because we were always outside, always hiking, always lived in the same general rural area where, you know, we don't have cities, we have animals. And for us to not be able to identify an animal that we see is just, that's not normal.
And the fact that it's just, and the fact that it's stuck with you all your life, it sounds like that you do remember that. Those moments kind of freeze in your mind, you know, when you are confused by what you see.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And you know, I've seen all kinds of animals, and even looking at exotic animals, I still have never found anything that matches what that was.
Oh, that's fascinating. Yeah, it's almost like people see these creatures called Dogman or, you know, Mothman and those kinds of things that cannot be identified. They never see them again, but sticks with them the rest of their lives.
Right.
Well, Liz, I have an idea right now, because I think it would be kind of fun to get another person on the line who would be interested in hearing some of these stories, and we might even get into some of the off topics here, including some of your ghosts that I've heard of as well. So if it's all right with you, what I thought I'd do is call in Mary Kennedy, who is a member of our UFO I-Team. She is a certified hypnotherapist as well, and might kind of have some interesting questions for you or input as well. How about that?
Sounds good.
Let's see if she is available. It'll be ringing here, and then we'll see if she picks up.
This is Mary. Leave a message. Thank you.
Mary is not picking up. Good for her. Well, I will continue to bug her here if I can. But the idea is that Mary Kennedy is a hypnotherapist trained by the famous ufologist and hypnotherapist Dolores Cannon. And I don't know if you have heard of Dolores, but she's passed on now just recently, actually, within the last year or so. And she is the member of our I-Team who is able to actually regress people hypnotically and come up with maybe a little bit more information that they've, that they have not been able to recall, under the normal circumstances. Have you ever heard of that being useful in law enforcement even?
I've heard of people trying to use it in law enforcement, but it usually when it is used, it's usually not admissible in court. So that's kind of a fine line.
I've heard that as well. You know, being the paranormal lawyer, of course, you know, it's the kind of thing that you aren't able to typically use as evidence in court. Although I have heard that sometimes law enforcement will use that as kind of corroboration, or at least try to get further information out of a witness, you know, for corroboration in other ways as well. So sometimes it is admissible, not as you know, the facts of the case, because it would be hearsay, but just as the ability for people to kind of recall a little bit more detail, possibly.
Hi, Michael.
Well, there she is. Thank you, Mary, for picking up there. Can you hear us okay? Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, I was listening to you online, and I heard you call, and I heard my voicemail pick up, but my phone never rang. I thought, that's weird. And then a couple minutes later, it rang. So.
Well, there you go. The powers that be are messing with us again there. So, Liz, can you hear Mary?
I can.
Oh, wonderful. And Mary, can you hear Liz?
I can hear her.
Well, wonderful. Thank you for jumping on here with us. We are speaking with Liz Reeder, of course, and she is the paranormal mystery. Liz, do we call you a paranormal mystery author, or is this a mystery writer who just does paranormal things as well?
You know, I listed as sci-fi action, so I don't know. I've got a book planned that is nothing to do with paranormal or sci-fi, so I'm really not sure what you should call me right now.
Well, that is interesting. And Mary, I was telling Liz that you are a member of the UFO I-Team and that you are our trained hypnotherapist and also trained in regressive hypnotherapy. And I mentioned to Liz that you were trained by Dolores Cannon. You might want to mention who Dolores Cannon is for the listeners, and also bring Liz up to speed on that.
Okay. Well, Dolores Cannon is also an author. She's written several really intriguing books, and she and her late husband, well, she's also passed now, but they had developed a style of hypnosis which she calls quantum healing hypnosis technique. And the gist of it is that you regress somebody, take them through some past lives, and the past lives that you go through are going to be the most appropriate to whatever questions, conditions, whatever it is that you want answers for in your present life. Because once you get through the past life, then we address higher self, source, God, whatever the person wants to call it, and ask for answers, ask for healing, ask for advice. This just depends on the individual what they want to bring forward from their own higher self or their own, whatever they consider source or the universe or God, whatever they call it. They're tapping into this higher power to get guidance, to get healing, to get advice, and it's really a fascinating process because people are all over the map when you regress them. Some people go back into their own childhood in this life, and some people go into past lives on other planets. Some people go into past lives on this planet as a non-human entity. So,
Liz, did you hear that?
I did.
I think that is kind of a cool idea for not maybe a prequel, but the idea that someone could be coming back in a past life as another entity. Is that what you're saying, Mary?
Yes. I had one person who after the whole session was done, we discussed it, and our best estimate is that she was going through a past life as an Anunnaki in, like really primitive times, before the advent of modern civilization and everything. And it was just really interesting. So, and another person I regressed was a crystalline being on a planet that was almost entirely covered by these crystalline beings. They wouldn't have been a life form as we would consider it, but the interesting thing was that not too long after we did that session, was it NASA or it might have been NASA, they discovered a planet, and they were calling it the Diamond Planet because it had some crystal structures all over it. So that was way too coincidental.
Oh my, that's a little timely right there. Is this something, Liz, that you've ever thought of yourself, maybe wanting to be regressed hypnotically for? Oh, there's even the purposes of medical healing or pain as well. That would be kind of interesting thing to explore, possibly.
I've thought about it, but then there's that little part in my brain that screams, "Don't do it. You don't want to know the answers to some of these things." So I haven't seriously considered it. I think part of it is there's not really anyone in my area that I know of who does that type of thing.
Yes, and Mary, Liz is in Missouri, by the way, and she lives in a wonderful log cabin out in the wilderness. That's what I call it. But how would you describe it, Liz?
I live in a farm.
On a farm.
That's pretty much it. I live on a farm.
Yeah, well, I think that's quite romantic in itself. But gosh, well, this is
kind of like me.
You know what? You're right, because Mary Kennedy is calling, Liz. You're going to love this, from the Double Luck Ranch, which is really quite a nice spread with horses, all sorts of animals, many dogs. And well, describe your residence out there, if you could, Mary.
Okay. Well, it's my sister's place, her and her husband, and they have 5 horses and a couple of goats, and between us we have 4 dogs. She also has 2 cats. So there's quite a bit of critters out here.
As well as potentially big feet out there as well.
Yes, we are in prime Bigfoot country, and we do back up to a tree farm, so there's quite a bit of wilderness around.
Very interesting. Well, Liz, this is your opportunity. If you have ever wanted to ask a question to a certified hypnotherapist that's got some experience, you can ask Mary anything you want.
I'm not sure what to ask. I've never really thought I would ever meet anyone who had experience like that. So I'm kind of at a loss on what to ask.
Oh, that's okay. Oh, but to address your earlier comment about you're really not sure you want to know, that's pretty important. That's a critical piece to the whole process, because a lot of people really don't want to know, or they're not ready to know. They want to know, what's possible as far as regression and memory recovery, but you really have to be very strongly sure that you want to recover those memories, because a lot of the memories, especially during like early adulthood and adolescence, and particularly for women, can be pretty traumatic. So you want to think really carefully about being regressed. And I also counsel people that they should, if they are going to be bringing up these old memories, they should also be in touch with a therapist that will take them seriously if it brings up any kind of anxiety for them that they are not able to easily assimilate. And we're very lucky here. We have Marcy Clevens, who's very active in the UFO community, and she's a psychotherapist, and she's wonderful. So we're lucky to have her here, and I would hope other areas would have people like that who would take the whole issue of abduction phenomena seriously enough to help people. And it doesn't help if people say you imagined it all and it doesn't exist. So that's kind of just an aside. It's something to take very seriously before you jump into it. You really want to give it some serious thought. And when people they kind of kick it around for a while and they talk to other people about what they should do, and then maybe they're not ready now, but maybe down the road the desire to know the truth outweighs any fear or anxiety they have about finding out that truth.
Right. Yeah, I've kind of joked about I must have done something really bad in a past life, or karma has me on the wrong list or something to have everything happen that has happened in my life. So, there's that kind of, I kind of want to know, but at the same time, I don't want to know.
Yeah, so at some point the scales will tip in one direction or the other. So there's something to keep in mind.
Liz, that just kind of also brings up a question that I just thought of for you. With the 51 book series and all these monsters and Bigfoots and cryptids and things that are these biological experiments from the local military base that this female sheriff has to deal with, are you approached periodically from paranormal groups in your area that would like you to potentially come and speak with them or give you ideas even for your books?
I have not had one paranormal group from this area or any other approach me.
Because I know that there are definitely some quite active groups in the Missouri area as well.
Yeah, I have not had anyone approach me. I've had one individual person message me and try to give me ideas on what I should write, but as far as groups, I've never had that.
Well, would you be adverse to talking with one of those groups if they approached you at one point?
No, I'd love to talk to them.
Yeah, matter of fact, I think it would be a good time now for all of us to hear some of your ghost stories, because I've heard that you said you grew up in a house that might have been haunted.
I grew up in a house, at least the property is almost definitely haunted or has some kind of residual something going on there. One thing that actually happened to my parents just after they were married, and being where they lived, it was not uncommon to have people on horseback looking for cattle, or even riding through your yard occasionally because they'd see their cow that got out in your yard, so they'd come through on horseback and get the cow and chase it back into the pasture. But my parents looked out their window and saw this man on horseback sitting under a tree in the yard, just there.
Really?
And they didn't recognize him. They didn't, it seemed very odd. And by the time they got to the door to, see if it was one of the neighbors to, looking for cattle or whatever, it was gone. And they thought, well, that's weird. Maybe he's gone, this way or, gone down through the yard and trying to do whatever he needed to do. And they went out and looked, and there was nothing there. And it had been raining, and there were no hoof prints. There was nothing, no sign that anything had ever been there.
Wow.
So that,
Wow.
yeah, that raises some red flags. And years later, we built a house there, and it was a 2-story house. No other house had been there. We built it, and we would be downstairs, and we would hear what sounded like someone walking from one side of the house all the way to the other side upstairs, and there was no one there.
Oh, my goodness. This is not a house that you moved into. This is a house that you built, and you're still hearing unknown footsteps inside the house.
Inside the house upstairs, yeah. And we would hear the doors slam closed, because the way the house was built, there was the house faced west, and there was a bedroom on the west side, and there was a bedroom on the east side, and a bathroom in between. There was, that's it. The stairs came up and stopped in front of the bathroom, and you would go from that landing either left or right into one of the 2 bedrooms. And we would hear the bedroom doors slam shut, and we would think, okay, the windows are open, so the wind came through and blew the doors shut. And we would go upstairs to open the doors, and the doors would be open. It's like, okay. And one thing that I experienced, and I never knew it was not normal because I grew up there, I always saw like a shadow out of the corner of my eye, and it would either be like some, catching a glimpse of someone walking out of the corner of your eye. And I did that my whole life. And we moved, and it stopped. It was like a switch. It just stopped. So that was a big that too.
Oh my goodness.
But unfortunately, where we moved to also apparently was haunted.
Oh, well, tell us about that. So, Nella, how old were you at this point when you moved?
18.
And then you moved.
So,
how far away did you move?
About 2 miles.
Okay.
So same general area, but it was, down the road. And what we didn't know when we bought the property and moved there was there were 2 children buried just up the hill from the house at the base of an oak tree. This is one of those cases that in the early 1900s, the families would come through and children would get sick, they would pass away, and they would have to just basically bury them where the children died. And that's one of those things that it's nice to know before you move there. But the only reason it was known was because one of the neighbors who stopped by said, oh yeah, by the way, there's 2 kids buried up there on the hill, so don't bother that tree with the rocks around it. It's like, what?
Don't bother the tree. There you go.
Yeah, don't. And come to find out, his parents had helped take care of the children and were there when they were buried.
Okay.
So
yeah,
that's how he knew.
And I'm going to throw this to Mary Kennedy, because being a researcher with the UFO I-Team, I would like you, Mary, to take over and ask Liz about the young ghost in the hoodie that might tie into these children.
The young ghost.
Where I see, that was actually at my house where I live, and that's 65 miles away from where the other occurrences happened.
So when did you see this one?
This one was probably 2010, 2011, somewhere in there.
Mm-hmm. So
I had.
How much time had passed between when you lived in the house with the two young children and this one?
10 to 12 years. So it's been some time, and I really didn't have any experiences anywhere I lived in between the two properties. So,
okay.
Yeah. So where I live now, I had gone out to feed my horses, and where I was at, I was putting the feed bins on the gates where they were fed, and I see this, what looked like this was not, a big, this was somebody who had a slight build, was smaller.
Mm-hmm.
I got the impression of.
Liz, let me jump in here real quick, because you cut out just as you were about to describe what you saw. So if you can just say that again, what you saw when you were out there putting the feed bags up, I think it'll be better to explain what you're talking about.
Okay. As I was doing that, I saw I got the impression of, slight build, smaller in stature. And I say hoodie and cargo pants because it was black, loose-fitting. This is not something that I definitely saw a hoodie and cargo pants. It was just that type of fit in what the clothing was. It was black, and this person was walking in the space between my house and my well house. Like they had come down the driveway through the front yard and was walking across to the side of the yard. I honestly thought it was probably the neighbor kid coming to pick up a basketball or something that my son had told him to come and get. So I finished putting the feed bins on the gate, walked to where this kid should have been, and there's no one there. I had kept my eyes on the area where this person had walked through, and they did not walk back out. But there was no one there. There were no footprints. It was muddy in the area. Go ahead.
So in other words, you saw this young child or an entity walk to a spot where you knew it had to come out, and it didn't come out.
Right. I saw it walk in the space between the house and the well house, and there was no other way to get back out except walk back through that same area.
Did it look very solid to you? Did it move in a normal fashion? Anything unusual about the way it moved or looked?
I thought it was the neighbor kid who had come up to pick something up that my son had told him to get.
Okay, so it just looked like a normal kid.
Yeah.
Well,
and I still have no explanation for that one either.
And when you when you saw that apparition or that kid, did it see you?
It never turned and looked at me. It looked like someone who was focused on a certain thing and was walking to that thing to get it, or, you know, go to a certain area. They never turned their head. They never looked away. They were just focused straight ahead in the direction they were walking.
And the idea of a hoodie and or loose-fitting pants, could you maybe translate that into some kind of a robe and or hood? Or was this definitely a modern-day hoodie?
Oh, it could have been any type of jacket or anything with a hood and pants that were loose-fitting. I mean, it's just, I say hoodie and cargo pants because that's the general appearance that it had.
Wow. Well, I think that's a fascinating story, and that's not that long ago.
No.
Has anything happened on that property since then?
I've had doors open and close. There's been shadows peek around the door frame into the room. I have a shepherd's lantern that will start randomly swinging in a circular motion for no apparent reason. Refrigerator door opens and closes. Yeah. A lot.
Oh, Mary, I think you opened the Pandora's box here with Liz. Keep going.
Yeah, and
Liz, how does it make you feel? Does it make you feel uncomfortable or afraid, or do you feel like it's like a non-threatening entity?
To me, it's non-threatening. I mean, it's here, but it doesn't do anything. It doesn't harm anyone. It doesn't, it doesn't break things. It doesn't scratch or cause any injuries. So, as long as it doesn't bother me, I'm not going to bother it. If it wants to look in my refrigerator, if it wants to open doors and close them, I'm okay with that,
So you're actually having some kind of a ghost or apparition open the refrigerator? Now that's a hard thing to do.
I thought I was crazy the first time I heard it, but the most recent time it happened, I was in the living room and the dog was beside me and he was awake for a change, and I hear the refrigerator door open and he turns his head and looks toward the kitchen. He heard it too.
Boy.
And then I heard the door close. I was like, oh, okay. So I'm not losing my mind. That's good to know.
Well, I think the dog would definitely know when someone opened the refrigerator door. That's what dogs do, right? Because they're expecting some kind of a treat. Now, it is interesting, though. The dog didn't get up and go try to check it out. The dog just stayed there with you?
He did. Yeah, I think part of it, enough stuff happened that it's just kind of like, oh, okay, this again. And they don't really, they're obviously not upset by it.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, I tell you what, Liz and Mary, we are now going to turn to a subject that both of you are very fond of, I believe. Liz is also a jewelry creator, and that is right up your neck of the woods here, Mary.
Oh, yeah.
You want to ask Liz about what kind of jewelry that she creates with some of these fascinating stones that I'm looking at her website?
Oh, yeah. Just why don't you describe the kind of jewelry that you do, and maybe a little bit about the technique that you use?
I do a little bit of everything. Most of what is on my website are pendants that I do wire wrapping on. Some are natural crystals. Others are stones that I have cut and polished. I try to keep the general shape of the stone as natural as I can. Like the edges will be irregular and rough, but then a very polished surface. I also make beaded earrings, like with seed beads and more intricate designs in them sometimes.
And so the stones that you use, do you choose them just for the color and the beauty, or do you also pay attention to the energetic properties present in all natural minerals?
I choose them based on the color and the individual stone and how well it will work for what I want to do in that particular piece. But I use a huge variety of stones too. So, you know, I have stones that cover just about everything.
And I'm looking at them right now on your Facebook page and website. Most of them are either about the size of a quarter or even a little bit bigger. Some of these beautiful pendants with the gorgeous. Is that copper or gold wire that you use to wire around them so you can hang them on a pendant?
Some are sterling silver and some are copper. I use both.
Well, copper is a little bit harder to find in jewelry. It's great that you're using that metal. It's a great metal, and like I say, it's difficult to find copper jewelry.
I love using the copper. I just love the color with the stones, but a lot of people do prefer the sterling silver, so I also use it.
Mhm. Can we say the website that we can find those on?
Sure. I mean, it's my personal website. It's lizreaderbooks.com.
And you can go there right now and just scroll down to all these beautiful stones. Where do you get your stones, Liz?
I have a lot of different places that I get them. Some of them I even are local stones that I have polished. Others I get through specific suppliers. Like if I'm buying the citrine, the quartz crystals, and the amethyst crystals, I have one supplier that I go to, and he's it. That's who I buy them from. A lot of the others, I find some of the best specimens at things like flea markets, where, you know, someone will have a booth where they were a collector or something, or just have a fascination with rocks that they've picked up here or there, and have found some amazing pieces that I can work with and cut and polish, and they're great.
Well, that's good. So you're repurposing as well.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, I just found the site, and let's see. Guess it'd be under shop.
Yes.
Okay.
And if you'll notice on there, Mary, she has some amazing beadwork on some of these earrings there. Tell us about those, Liz.
That is something I started doing when I was still in grade school. I don't even remember how I got into it, but I think my mother got a kit of some kind and asked me if I wanted to try them, and it went from there. And I have hundreds of designs that I've set and drawn out and come up with to make some of those.
Yeah, some of those are really intricate. It's funny, I did the same thing. I was in junior high school, and I got really interested in these, and I was just doing everything I could with them. I never got to this degree of intricacy, but I kind of got that bug early on myself, and I still, just recently picked up jewelry making a little bit recently, again, but just with not any metalworking or anything. It's fun, and it's a great way to create. These are really nice.
Well, Liz, I'm noticing that there are some beautiful, intricate designs that you've got here on many of these beadwork earrings that you've got. And knowing how you write your books by just sitting down and going for it, writing just off the cuff to get started, it sounds like you do a little bit different here when you're actually planning out an artwork piece like these earrings. Or do you just start in and see what happens?
Oh, the earrings, I absolutely, those, I have the microgrid graph paper where each square is the same size as the seed bead, and I sit down and I draw out the pattern specifically with the exact colors that I want to use, and I'm a perfectionist on. It has to be precise and perfect, and that everything is planned out.
Just the opposite than how you write. Yeah, there you go.
Complete opposite. My writing is so completely different from the rest of my life. It's completely insane because I'm a perfectionist. Everything has to be exactly right. All through school, I had to get A's. Everything had to be perfect. If I missed the answer on a question, it was, it was the end of the world. Everything had to be perfect. And the jewelry, the beadwork especially, it has to be perfect. And the stones, when I polish them, it has to be perfect. I don't like having the slightest bit of a scratch or an imperfection. I have to keep working on it until it's just right.
Wow, it's just beautiful.
I could certainly understand that.
Well, here's a thought that just came to my mind. Both of you ladies have talked about horses and your fondness for animals. In your book series, does Lindsay Gold, the county sheriff, have any affinity for horses in the book?
That's never brought up, but she does have a dog. And that dog is my dog Crook.
Wonderful.
That is him. So when you read the book and they're describing Crook as this white hound mix with this weird, short stubby tail because there's a crook in it and a twist in it and this one ear that's been injured so it looks all funky, that actually is my dog Crook. He is the only real thing in the book.
And Mary, you want to mention your fondness for dogs as well, maybe?
Oh, yeah. I grew up loving dogs. We've always had dogs, and currently have 2 Pomeranians. One's a rescue, and he's a bit of a head case. I think dogs are probably the best thing that ever happened to people. My job I have now is kind of fun because I work in a little retail shop in a tourist town, and people come in with their dogs all the time. So I love that. I get to see all these different breeds, all the different personalities, and so it's pretty great.
In my house growing up, we didn't have dogs, but we had cats. And then when I was a teenager, I got a German Shepherd, and she was my baby. So now I have dogs and cats and horses and chickens and whatever animal happens to show up that needs food. Pretty much, we wind up taking care of. So.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, we've always been the same way, taking in strays, and if whatever wanders up, we just take care of it. Since we were kids.
Well, Liz, it sounds to me that you might have had your cats at those previous houses where you might have experienced ghost activity. Is it possible? I've heard these stories that cats stop and look exactly at a certain corner of the room when there's nothing there. Did any of your cats notice any of this paranormal activity that you were experiencing back then?
Not that I remember. They would look, if there were sounds or like doors, closing or something like that, they would turn and look because they were hearing it too. But I don't remember them ever really just looking at something that wasn't there or that we couldn't see at least.
Got it. Yeah. But again, your dog Rook noticed that the refrigerator door came open, sounds like.
Yeah, that was actually Knothead that did that. So, yeah, he's that's a well-deserved name, too.
The dog's name is Knothead. Is that what you said?
Yes.
You want to explain that one?
It started out when he was a puppy. We were just trying to find a name for him, and he has a rather distinct knot, the bony crest on his head, and we just kind of jokingly called him Knothead, and it stuck because he is goofy and just lovable and does the craziest stuff. You just look at him and wonder what's really wrong with him, because no normal dog would ever do that.
I think you have a dog like that, Mary.
Oh, yeah, that would be my little rescue dog. He's just a little bit nuts. He suffers from a lot of anxiety, and he does crazy things. But my other dog, the one I've had since she was a puppy, she actually sees spirits.
Really?
Yeah, well, she sees spirits. I remember spending the night at a friend's house, and it was an apartment in Everett, and it had kind of a malevolent spirit that was bothering her there. And in the middle of the night, I was sleeping on the couch out in the living room, and in the middle of the night, although there was, she didn't have any animals or anything at the time.
Oh, we've lost you, Mary. Are you there anywhere?
Into the middle of the room where there was nothing there. And that kind of unnerved me a little bit. And then the house I had in Portland, it seemed that it had a spirit that lived in my big closet in the master bedroom. And she would just go to the closet.
Oh, we're losing Mary there. Can you hear me okay, Liz?
I can.
Okay. Well, I'm going to jump in here, and hopefully Mary will come back. But, that brings up an idea, and I'm sure people have wondered about this in your book series. Do you also bring in the idea of spirits or ghosts along with these monsters that are maybe a product of the military base? I don't know about ghosts.
I don't, but one thing I've done has actually bring in things from folklore.
Oh.
And used those too. And part of I did it accidentally, and it worked out beautifully. In book 4, there's an encounter with one of these things that basically pulls the heat out of whatever it touches.
Oh.
And I managed to loop that back in with, I don't know if you've read the books or not, but the head dispatcher is or was Russian. She came here when she was very young, but grew up with those stories of the different folklore from Russia. And one of them is a frost giant.
Oh.
So I managed to loop that back.
Yeah, she said frost giant. It pulls the warmth or the heat out of everything, right, Liz?
Yes.
Wow.
And,
so it was kind of an accidental thing that I just happened to, and I had written it in and then stumbled across this folklore from Russia that this is perfect. You know, this is what it is. And one of the dispatcher's brothers, actually 2 of her brothers, comes to work for the sheriff's department because they wind up being short-staffed because everyone starts quitting after all this chaos begins. And one of the brothers, he is skeptical on everything. He is a complete non-believer, and then after he encounters this, it kind of unnerves him because, you know, I know what this is. This is what I was told about when I was a kid. You know, this shouldn't be here. It shouldn't be real. So that was a very happy coincidence that it all looped back together.
Isn't that amazing that these things happen like that? You're coming up with an outlandish character, probably in your mind, out of the blue, and then all of a sudden you find out that it's tied up in folklore from another country.
Right. And I went in and I started looking for different things that I could pull and use from different areas to kind of say, hey, you know what, maybe some of these things from folklore, you know, maybe they did exist at some point, and this is how, you know, how these stories began. Oh,
definitely. Well, Liz and Mary, we are coming down to the last about minute and a half of the show. I can't believe how fast things went tonight. And my goodness, Liz, there's just so many layers and experiences to your personality here that I've just been having a wonderful time. And Mary, thank you for jumping in here. Do you have one last question you might want to ask Liz before we sign off?
Oh boy, no, I nothing to mind. My question, you know, how am I going to get a hold of her books? Because I really am interested in reading them.
Yes, definitely. Well, there are. Matter of fact, Liz, this is your chance. Why don't you tell us one last time where we can find your 51 book series and people can purchase them?
All of the books are available on Amazon. You can also go through my website and find additional links to where the books are available. You just go to the page that says books, and you'll see all the little buttons where you can just click on them, and it will take you directly to the site where it's available.
Great.
And let's make sure that people know how to spell your name, Liz, because it is spelled a little different than it sounds.
My name is Liz Reeder, and it's spelled R-E-E-D-E-R.
There it is, ladies and gentlemen. This has been Liz Reeder, the famous paranormal author, right here on NightDreamsTalkRadio.com. Liz, thank you so much for hanging in there with us for the entire night, and we really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you for having me.
And thank you, Mary, for jumping in there with us.
You bet. It was my pleasure.
All right. Good night, Liz.
Good night.
Story you want to share on Night Dreams Talk Radio? You could be a guest. Email us at nightdreamstalkradio@gmail.com.
Our intro music is provided by Kevin MacLeod at Incompetech.com.
Check out Night Dreams Talk Radio on the web at www.nightdreamstalkradio.com.
Morning.
So you got the 2-for-4 deal at McDonald's.
Oh, you too. Pulling an all-dayer?
Yep, I'm going to read all of my emails and respond.
I'm going to refill the water cooler, just to be nice.
Well, I'm going to start a book club where every coworker is welcome.
Oh, well, it better not overlap with the after-hours pottery class I'm hosting, so...
Pull an all-dayer. Get a sausage McMuffin with egg, a bacon, egg, and cheese biscuit, or a bacon, egg, and cheese McGriddles. Right now, get any two for just $4. Only at McDonald's. Cannot be combined with any other offer or combo meal. Single item at regular price at participating McDonald's.